Welcome back, everybody. Episode number 14 of The Next Perspective. I am joined this week by Air Force member Alexis Gerst. And the topic this week we're going to discuss is a book that she wrote that just came out about the different perspectives of leading a teleworking team. And of course, the challenges of leading a team that you've never actually met. Before we begin, I just want to say all of the opinions or ideas that we share today are our own, and they do not represent the DoD in any way. So, Alexis, thanks for joining me this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you, Nate, for having me on. I'm very excited to chat with you about this, and it's definitely a very needed topic right now.
Yeah, absolutely, because obviously here we are using a technology platform that I really wasn't even aware of a year ago, and you found yourself doing the same for the teams that you're leading. But before we get to that, let's just learn a little bit about you, where you're from, why you joined the Air Force, just some of the places and jobs that you've had, and what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I'm from Pequot Lakes, Minnesota, and I think we actually share that. We're both from the same state.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a small town, kind of like in the Brainerd Lakes area, so very touristy. My parents owned a horse boarding and riding stable, so I grew up kind of working in that family business and got to ride a lot of horses and do a lot of things with that. So that was a pretty awesome childhood, if I'm being honest. And
Yeah.
I joined the Air Force because one thing is kind of my family we called it rich in horses and land, but kind of poor on cash. We didn't have a ton of money. So
Sure.
actually, my instigator to join the military was because we didn't have any money for my college education. I was a valedictorian in my high school class, and it was definitely expected for me to go to college. But I didn't really want to go down the rabbit hole that was student loans. So the military was kind of my way to get my education paid for and have that opportunity, and also learn a skill and kind of develop that way. So when I first enlisted, it was 2014, and I was an enlisted airman. I was a nuclear weapons technician and spent about 4 years enlisted. And while I was doing that at FE Warren, got my bachelor's degree in business administration completely online. So I was working like 60 hours a week, kind of a grueling schedule. And then on the evenings and weekends, I was getting my bachelor's degree done online. So the nice thing was the military did cover all of that completely. So definitely got out of the military what I put into it, and was able to get that accomplished. And then in 2018, I commissioned. So I applied for officer training school towards the mid 2017, then got accepted about a year later, actually went. So I had just sewed on staff sergeant like the month before I actually left for officer training school. So made that and then commissioned. And when I commissioned, I was a acquisition program manager. So working in the more business and corporate side of the Air Force. And really what I do on a day-to-day basis is help with the contracting and managing of new weapon system development, and then ongoing with sustainment and modification of weapon systems. So I actually worked in supply chain, was my first assignment here at Hill Air Force Base, and worked in contracting replacement parts for ICBMs. And a lot of ICBMs are very obsolete now. So a lot of that was also working on modifications and replacement programs and things like that. And then now, actually, in the middle of the pandemic, I transitioned over to the Joint Direct Attack Munition Program. And that's also in the sustainment phase, but going through different obsolescence modifications and things like that as well. So I lead smaller teams, usually around the smallest team I had was about 4 people, and the largest one being about 12 to 15. Some of them are like directly under me, but then some of them, it's kind of a matrix organization. So some of the team members will support multiple different teams. But we deal with a lot of money. So up in the several millions of dollars, up into billions of dollars are some of the contracts that we do over multi-years. So it's definitely a high level of responsibility, and most of the people I work with usually have a bachelor's degree or higher.
Oh,
what did I
cool.
miss on the intro?
Yeah, I like you. I've all my school has been online. before I came in, I went to real college and got my associate's degree. But yeah, ever since then, you it's all been online. And so when the pandemic hit and our kids came home, I found it wasn't too difficult to be able to show them how to go to class, but it is difficult to try to teach the kids how to learn online, because a lot of it is just self-paced, self-learning, do the work.
Yeah, it definitely takes a level of self-discipline to follow through and actually do the work that it takes. And then I also forgot to mention I'm almost done with my MBA as well, so getting my master's degree. And yeah, I started that shortly after I commissioned. I was like, okay, I've got my job kind of going. I've learned that. And now what do I do? And one of my
Right.
bosses was like, well, start on your master's because you're going to need that in a few years. The acquisition world is definitely a highly educated industry, or dealing with a lot of like engineers who typically have their master's degree, and then high level business executive, both on the contracting side and on the government side. So it's definitely an expectation to get your master's.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm doing my master's too. I'm doing a leadership management program. I didn't go the MBA route just because I did my bachelor's in supply chain management, and I was
Okay.
done with doing the analytics courses and, and
Yeah.
the forecasting. I was just like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. That's kind of how I did a couple of finance classes, and that was pretty deep in the weeds as far as
Yeah.
like looking at different like stock valuations and things like that.
So did utilizing online school, did that have an impact in your approach to writing your book, or did it give you, where did you, we'll just start from the very beginning then, I guess. So you just had a book released called Leading Remote Teams: Embrace the Future of Remote Work Culture. Where did this idea start? Obviously, I mean, we're all dealing different types of telework or technology based work that we may not have been doing just over a year ago. So that definitely came into play. Was this an idea that you had prior to the pandemic and it just surfaced or was highlighted more because of the telework?
Yeah. So in a way, I mean, I always had the idea that I wanted to write a book in the back of my mind. I do a ton of reading. And so I've always thought that, hey, it'd be cool to write my own book and have my own book one day. But I didn't really know like what my thing was going to be. So, most authors, words are hard, have a topic that's like their specialty. And I didn't really know what that was for me. So that was kind of in the background, in the back of my mind. And then actually, before the pandemic started, the civilians I worked with were allowed to telework one day a week. So I kind of got used to
Okay.
planning some of our activities around, okay, so and so is going to telework on Thursday, and we normally have our team meetings on Thursday. So when like Microsoft Teams was brand new, we were already using like conference call numbers and
Yeah.
setting up things like there where we could do screen sharing and sharing the slides and set up meeting rooms that way, so that if somebody was teleworking, they could still be part of the conversation and part of the meeting, because those are really critical to what we do as a technical team. So we were kind of experienced with that before the pandemic hit. And then when it did hit and our organization said, all right, you guys have telework capability, everybody go home. And we were actually one of the first ones to adopt that. I was like, okay,
Okay.
we know how to do this. We've been doing it already, a little bit, one day a week. And I was like, okay, so we're just going to do it, and transitioned everything, started really embracing Microsoft Teams and conference call lines and things like that. We were already using conference calls and stuff like that a lot to meet with contractors who were spread out all over the country that we would work with on our different contracting efforts. So that was already pretty native in what we were doing on a regular basis. And then when we did transition everything, we just kept rolling with it and kept working as we normally would with our different efforts that we were working on. And after a couple months, one of my team members that supported multiple teams said, hey, LT, you're the only one that's still doing team meetings. Did you know that? I said, what? Are you kidding me? That just floored me. I didn't even consider that some people were just like completely putting everything on pause during the pandemic. And that just to me was not okay. You shouldn't just pause everything that you're doing. You're still getting paid. The warfighter still needs their parts, and we need to keep rolling. So with that, I started looking at, okay, what ideas can we share with the other team leads so that they can help get set up and get rolling. So after we were in it for a couple of months, it was pretty clear that we weren't going to be going back into the office anytime soon, and we couldn't just wait for things to, go back to normal, to quote. And a lot of people were kind of just waiting for things to go back to normal. They were like, well, we'll get to that when we get back into the office. And now we've been doing this for over a year. So it's pretty clear that we can't just wait for things to go back into the office, or we're going to not have parts on the shelf when we need them and not have the supplies that the maintainers need to fix jets and fix missiles and get them back on alert. So I think that was kind of the impetus to, okay, we need to start sharing these tools. We need to start talking about how to work together as a team and to accomplish our mission. So I actually started by just putting together some training slides, and I had some of these ideas, and I reached out to some of the training leads and said, hey, is this something you guys would be interested in? Do you want me to talk about this? And they said, absolutely. So I kind of just outlined everything into a presentation and got together with some of the logistics managers and program managers. And it was just like an hour training, and we went through some of the different ideas, why leading remotely matters, so why we need to care about it. We can't just wait for things to go back to normal, and kind of the future outlook of remote work. And then we talked about how to build trust on your team. So that's very important when you're in a digital environment. It's a lot harder to build trust when you're not physically together, because when you have a conversation with someone and you're right next to them, you can build that trust a little bit easier than when you're talking to somebody through a video and a microphone. And then after that, we talked about how to effectively define your priorities and then execute those. So how do you actually carry out the tasks that you need to be doing and make sure everybody stays focused on a day-to-day and a week-to-week basis? Because a lot of people can just wait for their inbox to fill up. And if they're not getting any emails, and they're like, well, I don't have anything to do. And that's not the case. They need to be proactively identifying those things that they're supposed to be doing and carrying those out. And then the last one was communicating effectively through digital mediums. So email is a big one, and then also utilizing video and other collaboration tools like that. So that was the outline of the presentation, and that's kind of the major outline of the book and how it's organized as well. So I started doing those training presentations and got some really good feedback and a lot of interest in it. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. So I shared it on LinkedIn. I was like, hey, this is what I'm doing. And a couple of the gentlemen in the Logistics Officer Association got a hold of it, and they were like, hey, we want you to do a presentation for the Women in Defense Logistics. Is a newer group at the time. When I started in January, they were just kind of launching that group. And they were like, hey, do you want to be our keynote speaker for our kickoff? And I was like, sure, that sounds cool. And I did that. And again, a lot of positive feedback from a lot of leaders around the Air Force in logistics. So that was a cool opportunity to do that. And then they were like, okay, we want you to speak at our Logistics Officer Association Symposium, which is like over 3,000 people attend that. And I was like, wow, this has some legs, and this is definitely an idea that's in demand. So after that, I was like, I think I have my book topic, and I think I need to write a book about this, because it was already just so much positive feedback and so much demand for it, really. Everybody's kind of been struggling and floundering on how to adapt to the remote environment and what is this going to look like going forward. So that was kind of how the book came to be. And I just took the outline and I transitioned it into a book format and started writing all the ideas out.
Wow, that's crazy. So what was you talked about building trust using digital communication. What's a strategy that you emphasized with your team or talked about in the book?
So one important thing to building trust, there's two different ideas that I kind of blend together in the trust equation. And the two things are reliability and likability. So are you a reliable leader, and are your team members reliable contributors? And then are you a likable leader? I think some people get a little bit caught up on that. Well, I'm their supervisor, I'm their leader, I'm not their friend. And yes,
Right.
we need to be professional, but at the same time, you need to be a person that's generally enjoyable to work with and be around. So those two things kind of combine together. And one of the ways that we really need to focus on building trust with a remote team is allowing people to have informal conversations, because remote work can be really transactional. Especially we saw that in like the first few months. It was like, I'm only going to call you if I need something from you. And after we've been missing the human connection for so long, that can just feel really, really dry and really transactional. And it's not fun to be a part of a team that's just completely transactional. So I really encourage people before and after your regular meetings to just be informal and talk to each other about that normal, office chat that you would have. How's your weekend? What are you doing next weekend? What are your plans? What are some fun things that you're working on in your personal life? How are your kids doing? That type of stuff is just, it's kind of ingrained in the culture. And learning about what's
Yeah.
going on in somebody's personal life is really important to looking out for them, especially when we've had all these challenges with like mental health and isolation and that type of stuff. It becomes way more important.
Yeah. I was just, yeah, mental health stuff, huge. I was just telling my daughter this morning, she actually started her freshman year of high school this year. And
Oh,
so starting high school, you're hit with a pandemic. And then, she had been in and out because of different exposures. That's when she transitioned to the full online. And I just reminded her today, I was like, you have overcome more than what you realized by even just, starting high school is already hard. And then to go from in person, out person, in person, out person, and then completely online. Like you said, losing that human element has taken its toll on a lot of people.
right. And then on top of that, your family is in the middle of a PCS right now too. So then moving to a new school, is she able to, since she's doing remote, is she able to finish out the school year with her old school before she actually moves?
Yeah, she'll finish the online portion actually while we're in Hawaii, and then she'll transition to the Hawaii school system next year for her sophomore year.
Wow, yeah. That's a lot of challenges to overcome, especially being in high school and that volatile time in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll stay on the theme of challenges then, because you did transition right from you changed positions during the middle of this and began leading a team that you'd never actually met in person. Is that correct?
Yes, that is. So a whole different perspective, right? When you
Right.
know people, like I had this tight knit team, we were high performing, we all knew each other, we were very comfortable and had a lot of trust with each other. And I got to lead them for a few months. And then in July of 2020, transitioned to a new organization, scheduled permanent change of assignment. You've been in one place for 2 years. Now you got to move to another one for
Right.
2 years. So that was super interesting because the only time I actually went into the office was to like get my computer and meet my supervisor and sign the hand receipt saying we gave you this computer. And that was it.
Yeah.
And then they were like, okay, so we'll email you the in processing checklist and you have to do all of that virtually because everybody's teleworking. And I was like, cool. This is going to be an interesting
Yeah.
challenge. And so I had to meet everybody virtually because I've actually still never met. I've met a couple of the engineers just because like one time we went in to tear apart some tail kits and I volunteered to just go in. I didn't have to, but I wanted to meet people and see the weapon
Right.
hands on. So I did volunteer to go do that. But like a lot of the other program managers on the team and the like our equipment specialists and item managers, I've never met in person. I've just seen them. Actually, some of them never even turn their video on, so I've only heard their voice and seen like their profile pictures. So that's, I mean, kind of impersonal, right? And it's interesting
Yeah.
to go from that perspective. But yeah, over time, you just get to know people as you work with them and ask questions of them. One thing that I try to do is to over communicate. So just using like Skype Messenger, now we're on Teams, and just emailing them more
Right.
often than not. And if I have a question, just being able to say, hey, are you the right person for this? Or do you know who I should talk to about this? Going that route is a good way to start learning who's who and getting connected. And the other thing I did was I asked my supervisor and my predecessor, who had left the organization right before I replaced him. I was like, hey, can you get me like a list of the people that you normally talk to and the different stakeholders that I need to know? Because that's critical, right? I have to know who to reach out to. And when you're a new person in an
Yeah.
organization, if the old person leaves and doesn't tell anybody they're leaving, and then the people that normally interact with them don't know who the new person is, well, they're not going to email you because they don't know who you are and they don't know that they're supposed to be talking to you.
Right.
So that was, I just addressed the elephant in the room right away. And I sent an email to each person on that list. And I said, hey, I'm the new person. I'm replacing Tom. And this
Right.
is my role. This is what I'm covering. And this is really awkward because I just said it straight out. This is really awkward because we're completely virtual and I don't really know what's happening. So, can you, this is a little bit about me. I'm I'm in Utah right now. I have 2 dogs and a husband, and I like running and doing things like that. And can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your experience and what you've been working on with my predecessor as far as the current ongoing efforts that I need to be aware of and what I need to be tracking to? And it was really that simple. It was just reaching out, being proactive in the communication and saying, hey, I'm here. If you need anything, definitely reach out. I want to talk about what's been going on and kind of getting a handle that way. So definitely an interesting challenge. And as I've got to work, I've been there almost, like 9 months now. I've started to get to know a lot of the different people through different meetings and just kind of immersing myself in, hey, can I jump into all of these virtual meetings so I can know what's going on and meet people and find out who's who? I think that was a big part of the onboarding and integration into the culture and figuring out exactly what's happening.
Yeah. And I think something that you did, if it was deliberate or not, I think just the willingness to jump in and not shy away from the fact that the situation is weird and different, but instead of hiding behind it and be like, well, I'll check my emails or I'll do the task when I get called, but doing a 180 and say, no, I'm going to jump on the team. I'm going to let people know who I am. I'm going to figure out who these people are. Because like you said, a lot of times when you do start a new job or you're in a new position, it's not that you don't really know the job. It's you just don't know the social network of who to talk to get something done. This is my 5th base or whatever now. And there's been so many times that you go somewhere and you're like, hey, I need this thing. And like you said, they'll say, yeah, you got to talk to Tom. He knows what he's doing. Or Alexis is the new Tom. So, and then once you
Right.
get, and then once they get to know you, they'll stop saying this is the new person. And then it just becomes the natural way of doing things.
Yeah, I think it definitely builds a lot more respect with the new people that you're interacting with when you're willing to just jump in and say, hi, I'm here. I'm replacing so-and-so. Anything you used to go to him for, now come to me for. I think that goes a long way towards, building that respect and that credibility. Otherwise, if you're just hiding, and it's really easy to hide when you're working remotely because you're at your house and people aren't seeing you in the office in the hallway and saying, oh, who's that new person? They don't know you unless you introduce yourself and show up. So, the alternative is you can hide and not reach out, but then you're also, your job's going to be really easy at first because you're not going to have anything to do. So you're not really gainfully employed.
Right.
But then also things can blow up after a couple months if you're not taking care of them and handling them proactively. And then all of a sudden you're reactively trying to catch up on things. So I don't really think that's a great route to go.
No, I don't think so either. So while you took over this new team, were there any challenges that you didn't expect that surfaced, or any pluses to working, teleworking and leading that you didn't foresee either?
I think the biggest challenge that I didn't really expect. So I'm definitely an introvert. I would say when we first got to go to telework, I was all for it because I just want people to leave me alone and let me do my work for the most part. And after several months of teleworking and having to kind of change my network into a new organization and get to know new
Yeah.
people, I was surprised by how much I longed for that like human connection and
Mm.
just like informal interaction with people. That was probably my biggest surprise / challenge. So then learning how can we implement more of this, even though it's still not safe to like gather together and do like a wingman day or a team lunch or something like that. How can we incorporate some of that fun and that informal conversation into our regular activities and our meetings and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what were some ways that you did that? I suppose it just has to be a little bit more deliberate since it's online.
Yes. So that's really what it comes down to, is just being intentional about including those
Yeah.
things and allowing it. So, I mean, sometimes it happens automatically. People start joking around. And I think encouraging that to a certain level is fine. You obviously don't want it to take over your whole meeting or a crazy amount of time, but encouraging the joking around and the casual conversations and checking in on how people are doing, I think, is the biggest difference. But it really takes being intentional about it and deliberate, like you said, about, okay, we know that we're not able to connect in the office and have the water coolers conversations and the running into people in the hallways. So how can we do this more intentionally? And I
Yeah.
know a lot of the organizational leaders were just scheduling times like, okay, for this division or this branch, we're going to have some of the leadership come in with this section and say, okay, we're going to update you guys on what the status of things are, what to expect going forward, what's going on in the division, and then like, what are your questions? What are you concerned about? What do you want to talk about? And then once we kind of got through all that, then the commander would just call out on people and say, what have you been up to lately? What are you doing? And I think that went a long way towards encouraging those conversations and checking in with people and connecting.
Yeah. And hopefully too, as we move forward to some whatever the new type of normal or how we'll run things here in the future, is the vaccine starts to come out and everything else like that, is that us as leaders take the time to be intentional and deliberate to build those relationships in person as we're doing, online and stuff now too.
Definitely. I think we can take some of the lessons learned from this time and be more intentional. I wasn't, I was just kind of new in the leadership type role before, a couple of years before the pandemic started. So I wasn't like super intentional about that before. It just kind of happened. So I think now going forward, taking that lesson and learning to be more intentional. I know with like my organization, because we're so like everything's on a computer, we're
Yeah.
looking at doing probably, you said the disclaimer at the beginning, this is my own personal opinion, does not represent official views, but we are looking at hybrid options. What do people want to do? So the chances of getting everybody together in person are still super slim. It's still going to be probably all of
Right.
our meetings virtually. Even if some people are in the office together, we'll still be doing it virtually because other people aren't going to be in at the same day at the same time. So I think we'll definitely see a lot more of the virtual meetings and virtual communication going forward.
Yeah, I was going to ask you too, what's something that you've learned then in these last, 9, 12 months that you've been doing telework wise that you think will be fully implemented once we do get back to a new type of work normal, whatever that may be?
So one like tool that I've learned during the pandemic that I think has been super useful, and I think can also be really useful even if you're in the office on a regular basis or working in person with your team, is a weekly stand-up meeting. I think that is, so what a weekly stand-up meeting is, I'll back up for a second. What it is basically you just get everybody on your team together on like a Monday morning, kind of get settled and then get everybody together for like 15 to 30 minutes, depending on how many people you have on your team. It's just a quick informal thing. And basically it's just a look at, okay, what are our priorities for this week? What are the meetings and deadlines and different things that we need to make? And everybody then kind of has that situational awareness of what's happening on the team. So going over, what your meetings are, what your priorities are, what's going on, and then going around the room and having each person identify what their top 1 to 2 priorities for the week are. I think that goes a long way towards being productive overall as a team, and then making sure that everybody's also gainfully employed. And one thing that can kind of help you do is, if somebody wasn't gainfully employed, they're going to quickly make themselves useful because they don't want to be the one person that's not
Yeah.
contributing. So it kind of like instills a little bit of personal motivation as well, because they want to be a contributing member of the team. But then also, if some people are overworked, it can help you spread out the workload as well, so that one person's not completely overworked and overwhelmed while somebody else is looking for things to do. So it can kind of even that out,
Yeah.
make sure that the whole mission's getting covered and that everybody's sharing the workload together.
Yeah, that's an awesome idea. Even the sections that I've ran, yeah, I'm still base level supply. So for our office, the individual protective equipment section and then flight service center stuff, you have to physically be there to touch parts or touch gear or, hand things over and stuff like that. So when all this was happening, we had to spread out, right? So that was one of the things is you couldn't have as many people. So we ended up making different shifts and stuff like that. So kind of like you, we would do a daily quick 5-10, like you said, 5-10 minutes, like, hey, this
Mm-hmm.
is where team 2 was left off yesterday or last night or whatever the schedule was. And here's the priority for the week. This rotator's coming in or this inventory is coming up. And like you said, then once you can get those priorities out there, people tend to be like, oh, okay, that's what I know I need to do. I can knock that out.
Yeah, I definitely think it helps. Just a few minutes of being proactive can really help shift the focus of the entire team, get everybody on the same page working together versus waiting to be told what to do. And if you're, especially like airmen tend to be a little bit more of like needing direction. And I found that even with some of the civilians that I lead as well, they need some direction and a little bit of like, hey, this is what you're supposed to be doing, or, help them identify that for themselves. Otherwise, they're like twiddling their thumbs a little bit, wondering what they're supposed to be doing until something all of a sudden hits their inbox. Hey, can you do this? Or they fall behind on something and then they're like, oh crap, I have all these things I need to do. So yeah, a little bit of
Right.
proactivity goes a
Yeah.
long ways, and it helps your sanity and your work-life balance a little bit as well. So then you're not getting overwhelmed with emails at 5 p.m. when you're trying to log off for the day, and you can space that out
Yeah.
proactively throughout the week.
Absolutely. Yeah. I didn't mean to cut you off there. Sorry. But
No, you're good.
no, I was just going to, yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, a thing that I teach my techs and staffs, right? Because even teleworking, not teleworking, what we get in the habit of is we'll just sit at the computer and wait for the next email to come in. And then boom, that suddenly becomes the priority because you're sitting there. And so I tell them, I'm like, hey guys, you need to schedule email time. Like, schedule it out. You don't need to just sit here. Like, come in, do something for an hour. If that email's not coming, well, then guess what? That's not the priority. Go finish your other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one thing that I talk about in the book is like prioritizing based on like level 1, 2, and 3. So level 1 being like this has to be done, today or this week, and it's
Yeah.
the most important thing. And then 2 is like, okay, well, it doesn't have to be done right now, but it will need to be done soon. And then 3 being more of those like longer picture. And when you can, I use time blocking where you can kind of focus on one thing for a specific amount of time and focus on that and knock it out and like shut the email down when you're doing that, so you're not constantly getting distracted. Really helps with the time management piece. But if you can do that and learn to prioritize, first things first, second things second, then all of a sudden you're working on, you got your priority 1 stuff knocked out, and then you're getting priority 2 stuff done ahead of time, so then it doesn't have to be priority 1
Right.
immediate, and then you have way more control over your time and your flexibility that way, and way less overwhelm and things like that as well.
Yeah, what I like to do when I head into a new section or take a new position is I'll find out what the daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly requirements are, and then of course, depending on that, you can start to rack and stack. What's important, what, like you said, put them in the different levels of when and how you need to attack different things.
Definitely. I think that goes a long ways towards being proactive versus reactive. So many people just wait and get into the reactive mode and then their hair's on fire constantly. So, yeah, definitely can help you shift and be more calm and present as a leader as well.
Yeah. So as we wrap up here, what best advice would you give to leaders and even followers now as we figure out, because we're not gonna, like you said, we're not just gonna all go back into work like in next week or a month or 3 months. It's going to be completely different. So as teams have had to learn how to telework and communicate and lead and build trust, what would your best advice be to those people and organizations as we do move forward?
That's a pretty open-ended question. I would say communicate with your team. We really have the opportunity right now to intentionally design our best case work scenario. So, and everybody's going to be a little bit different. So, talking to them and engaging your team members on what do we want this schedule to look like? Do you want to come in a couple days a week? Do you want to come in not at all, maybe one day a week, or do you want to come in every day? And what does that ideal scenario look like for you? A lot of people have found better flexibility in being able to, get their gym time in and spend more time with their family when they don't have to do the commute every day and they don't have to, get dressed and do their hair and makeup and maybe not have to shave every day if you're a guy, and embracing that flexibility and helping us live our lives a little bit more intentionally. I think we have a great opportunity for that. So I think the biggest thing right now is just to think about this ahead of time instead of just waiting and falling into whatever the plan is. And then as a leader, communicate. I mean, maybe you have control over the work schedule. Maybe you don't. Maybe that's coming from a level higher than you. So then communicating those needs and desires up to the leadership above you, to the people who do have the power to make those decisions, and helping proactively implement that rather than just waiting for them to decide on whatever they want it to be and then having to deal with the aftermath.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think, the Air Force and other organizations, obviously, pandemic's awful and we want to get through it safely and as quickly as we can. But I also think too, us as an Air Force and with our smaller teams at the different levels that we're at, we have an incredible opportunity to find out how to, accelerate the change as General Brown has laid out for us in different facets, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
just like you had started, you made a whole training thing and it ended up being a book. Like this whole thing, you probably still would have written your book, but it would not be what it is today without your deliberate approach and just your new learning that you had to do just to lead in your new environment.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm glad that I did like the trainings and iterations of it before I actually wrote it into a book, because I was able to get a lot of good feedback on what people were actually challenged with and what was really difficult for them, and being able to provide those tools to help them implement that as they lead their teams going forward.
Yeah, and like you said, it was kind of a cool thing for you. You really were writing it before you knew you were writing it, and you got to get all kinds of, like you said, the different types of feedback. And I'm sure you'd had multiple versions that you ran through. I just think it's a really cool story, and I'm glad that you took time out this afternoon to share it with me and share it with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where can people get your book?
So the book is on Amazon. I have a paperback version and a Kindle version. And then I also have an audiobook that is in the approval process currently. It usually takes about 30 days to go through and, get all the blessings that it needs. And then that'll be available through Audible as well. So Amazon.com, type in leading remote teams. It should be one of the first results. And you can also connect with me at my website is www.alexisgerst.com. Um, I have all the links to my social pages on there. So I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and like Goodreads and Amazon have some author pages as well. So they can connect with me wherever they prefer.
Awesome. And I'll throw all that information on the show notes for everybody so they can click right to the book for you.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Alexis. This was a great conversation. I had a lot of fun. And thanks everybody for the download. And this has been another Next Perspective.